Welcome to the show, everybody. This is your boy Lo Jackson coming to you live with the Only You podcast, where we're doing book reviews. Today we're going to be discussing a book called The Courage to Be Disliked, the Japanese phenomenon that shows you how to change your life and achieve real happiness, by Ichiro, Kishimi, and Fumitake, Koga. This book was written or published on May 8th, 2018. Ichiro Kishimi is considered a Japanese philosopher who was born in Kyoto, Japan in 1956. He is 66 years old. He is also a translator of English and German, Goodreads reports. He is a former counselor at Medea Clinic in Kyoto, Japan. He taught philosophy and ancient Greek at various institutes such as the Kyoto University of Medicine and Nora Women's University. He's a very involved person in his community. The other author of this book is Fumitake Koga. He is an award-winning author and writer. He has released numerous best-selling works. He encountered Adlerian psychology in his late 20s and was deeply affected by its conventional wisdom and defying ideas. When they speak Adlerian psychology, they're talking about Alfred Adler, who was an Austrian medical doctor and psychiatrist. He was born May 28, 1870. He is a psychotherapist and founder of Individual Psychology. And you can find this book on Amazon for $12.99. I actually got it at Google for $13.95. It's on Audible for $17, or the Book Depository for $10.48. His emphasis on the importance of feelings of belonging, family constellation, and birth order set him apart from Freud, and that's Sigmund Freud, and other members of the Vienna Circle. His early work focused on inferiority complex, an isolating element that plays a key role in personality development. Adler was the first to emphasize the importance of the social element and the readjustment process of the individual, and to carry psychiatry into the community. He's considered 67th of the most eminent psychologists of the 20th century. The first chapter is The First Night, Deny Trauma. And that's really important in this book, and it's talked a lot about it, is denying trauma. And once I started really thinking about denying trauma, because I never realized that I was taking a more Freudian approach to all my psychological beliefs up until the point I read this book. So if you get a chance to get this book, you guys, I'd get out there and buy it. I give this book a 4-star review. Some of the terminology inside of this book is hard to understand if you're not on a psychological level and if you haven't been educated, but Google's at your fingertips, so any word I ever find or come across, I always Google it if I don't know what it means, because there's so many words in the English dictionary that people use that they have no idea what it means. And you know, certain words win court cases and all kinds of other things too. Your terminology does matter in life. Adler was the first to emphasize the importance of the social element in the readjustment process. I want to go over that again. That's important. And The First Night, Deny Trauma. The Unknown Three Giants. In this chapter, the authors talk about Freud and Jung, and he explains that Adler is the third giant in the psychiatrist of their time. And the next chapter is called Why People Change. If change were so easy, people would not spend time wishing they could change. This is why many people get taken advantage of by new religions, self-help, the positive movements. Before there is an effect, there is a cause, the author states. Everyone that has been abused by their parents would have to live the same life as someone who was not abused to determine if the past really affects the future. If we focus on the past causes and try to explain them solely through cause and effect, we end up with determinism. Determinism, this says our present and our past have already been decided, which I think all of us know that no human being likes change, but in all instances, change is possible if the person who wants it actually seeks it. So, in Adlerian psychology, we do not think about past causes, rather about present goals. When someone does not want to do something, he's creating an anxiety inside of himself, which starts from his own insecurities, and I think most of us know this is true. You manufacture fears and anxieties in order to achieve your goals. And when I read this, I was blown away at all the numerous times I can think back during my school years of how I used, fear and anxieties to achieve goals, whether it be for studying for the Constitution or studying for just a regular math exam. I would use fear and anxieties of, oh no, what if I don't pass, or what if and I think kids all over the place do this with their schooling and their grades. You manufacture fears and anxieties in order to achieve your goals. In Adlerian psychology, this is called teleology. 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 Even physical ailments are caused by trying to reach a goal using fear and anxiety. The difference between etology, the study of causation, and teleology, the study of the purpose of a given phenomenon rather than its cause. If we stay in etology, we will never, ever take a step further in life. The next chapter in this book, trauma does not exist. And I won't lie, when I read that title, I froze. I really had to sit and think about all the things that have gone on in my life and the traumatic experiences that come along with just living, period. I'm like, how in the world can trauma not exist when you got PTSD victims out there suffering the worst type of physical ailment you could believe? So anyways, we're going on with trauma does not exist. Most counselors and psychiatrists use etology. The cause of your problems are these things from your past. And in reality, I was always using that too, etology, because I thought, in my mind made me actually lean towards this way, because there had to be a reason for my behaviors, a reason for my personality, a reason for my everything, So I believe when I read this, it was etology is everything in my life that I've based everything on up until this point of reading this book. The argument concerning so-called traumas is typically of etology. The author says in this chapter that he adamantly denies that trauma exists. And I couldn't believe that he was saying that either in this chapter, that he adamantly denies that trauma exists, because how can trauma not exist when everything that we're taught up until this point is that our traumas are real? But once I started thinking about it, I thought, whoa, me believing the Freudian way made me stuck in my traumas. But here, we'll go on with this and then you'll draw the conclusion that I did. Adlerian psychology, trauma is definitively denied. This was a very new and revolutionary point, and it was for me as well when I read this book. Freudians believe that a person's psychic wounds or traumas are the cause of his or her unhappiness. And that's how I was always thought to believe that was true, you know? When you treat a person's life as a vast narrative, there is an easily understandable causality and sense of charismatic development that creates strong impressions and is extremely attractive. But Adler, in the denial of the trauma argument, states the following: no experience is in itself a cause of our success or failure. We do not suffer from the shock of our experiences, the so-called trauma, but instead we make out on them whatever suits our purposes. And that makes sense to me. You know, let me read that again. We do not suffer from the shock of our experiences or the so-called trauma, but instead we make out on them whatever suits our purposes. And I think everybody out there does that. I mean, you have to get through life. And we just have never had anybody point it out to us. So in this book, if you get out there and get it, you'll realize that it is going to lead you and make you feel a different type of way. It'll change the neuroplasticity in your brain, because it did mine. I loved it. We are not determined by our experiences, but the meaning we give them is self-determining. And that is total fact in this next chapter. He is not saying the horrible calamities or abuses during childhood or other incidences have no influences on forming a personality. Their influences are strong, but the important thing is that nothing is actually determined by those influences. We determine our own lives according to the meaning we give those past experiences. Your life is not something someone gives you, but something you choose yourself, and you decide how you live. And that makes sense because we all do. The author says, if your child stays in their room all the time, won't you get worried as a parent? Of course you would. Once your parent is worried, you then get all your parents' attention, and then your parents become extremely careful handling you with kid gloves at all times. Now, your child is always in his room, and then, you have this relationship where, you're handling him with childlike gloves all the time, but then he steps out into society, and then all of a sudden, he's no longer special. He's no longer has those securities that he once had, and it causes him to be insecure. The next chapter is People Fabricate Anger. The author in this chapter talks of a young person telling him about a guy spilling coffee on his jacket. Then the young man jumps up out of his seat and flips out, shouting in a public place at this person that had spilled their coffee. So the author says, so you were stimulated by the emotions of anger and ended up shouting, yet you are normally a mild-mannered person. Yes, the young man states, because it happened so fast. The author says, so suppose you had a knife and stabbed the other person. Oh, well, wait a minute. That's a little extreme, the young guy says. And it is not an extreme argument. If we proceed with your thinking, any offense committed in anger can be blamed on the anger, then is no longer the responsibility of the person, because essentially you are saying that people cannot control their emotions. The youth says, how do you explain my anger then? That's easy. You didn't fly into a rage and then start shouting. It was solely that you got angry so you could shout. In other words, in order to fulfill the goal of shouting, you created the emotion of anger. Let me repeat that for you guys. That was a good one. And when I read this, it was mind-blowing. He says, you didn't fly into rage and then start shouting, it was solely that you got angry so you could start shouting. In other words, in order to fulfill the goal of shouting, you created the emotion of anger. I found that to be so true in my own life that sometimes I catch myself doing that. Because every time you read something or a book like this, you reflect on your life and how it pertains to you or how you could use it in certain areas of your life. And you start to realize, when books point things out, it's like, whoa, I've been doing that for a long time. We need to nip this in the bud. The youth said to the author at this point, he says, what do you mean? And the author says, the goal of shouting came before anything else. By shouting, you wanted the other person to submit to you and listen to what you had to say. To do this, you fabricated the emotion of anger. Anger is an impulsive action. That's right. Anger is an instantaneous emotion. Anger is a tool that can be taken out as needed. It can be put away the moment the phone rings and pulled back out once the phone call ends. We use anger to overpower and control the other person. Teleology says anger is a means to achieve a goal. Next chapter, how to live without being controlled by the past. The author speaks on nihilism, which is Nihilism, Nihilism. In this chapter, nihilism, in the definition of nihilism, is the rejection of all religious and moral principles and the belief that life is meaningless. What a terrible way to be. Everyone has emotions, but if you're telling me that people are beings who can't resist emotion, I'd argue against that. But if you're denying your emotion, you're upholding a view that tries to deny our humanity too. Adlerian psychology is a form of thought that is opposed to nihilism. People are not controlled by their thought or past, so this is a now thing, a subjective thing. Regardless to what may have happened in the past, it is the meaning that is attributed to it that determines the way someone's presence will be. The question isn't what happened, but how was it resolved? We can't go backwards. We can't go backwards in time. If you ended up staying in etology, you will be bound by the past and never be able to find happiness. Life isn't just hard. If the past determined everything and the past couldn't be changed, we who are living today could no longer take steps forward in our lives to change. The result we would end up with the kind of nihilism or pessimism that loses hope in the world and gives up hope. Think of the possibilities if one assumes that people are beings who can change a set of values based on etology, become untenable, and one is compelled to take the position of etology as a matter of course. Remember, it is Remember, it is Freudian etology that denies our free will and treats humans like machines. People are not driven by past causes, but move towards goals that they themselves set. The first step towards change is knowing. In the next chapter of this book, he talks about Socrates and Adler, and he compares them in this chapter. Socrates and Adler both conveyed their ideas by dialogue, and so, in dialogue is what they're talking about. And you will begin, All your doubts will be dispelled through this dialogue, and you will begin to change, not by my words, but by your own. And I had no idea that Plato actually was the one that started to write down all of Socrates' teachings, and that's how the world came to know Socrates like we know him today. I'm going to end this book review right here, everybody. Thank you for listening. This is the Only You podcast, and I would encourage you to run right out and buy this book. I give it a 4-star review. Thank you for listening, and please tune in next time. And let me know if you guys have any questions. Please follow me, share me, and keep listening. I'm going to try to put very informative information into these podcasts on these books so that maybe it'll encourage you to go out and buy this book and read about this author and learn about authors and what they're doing in the world and how you also can become more intelligent, wise, by learning things that can help you excel in life. Once again, this is the Only You podcast coming to you live.